In today's episode, we're going to hear from one of your questions. Lisa from California wants to know, what's the difference between my cash balance pension and a traditional pension? I've worked here for 15 years and I still don't get it. I'm going to grab Walt and we'll dive in and answer that for you.
Another edition of Power Your Retirement. Walter Storholt alongside certified financial planner Steve Smith. And a great episode today as we answer another viewer question here on the podcast. Today's from Lisa in Bakersfield, California. And you teased the question a few moments ago, Steve. This should be a good one to get to. I would imagine, before we dive in here, this ranks pretty high up on your common questions list. Would that be right?
Definitely. There's a lot of confusion when it comes to the pensions in the utility industry, for sure.
Yeah. Well, you often hear, well, hey, what's the difference between like a traditional and a Roth IRA? Well, here in the utility employee world, you kind of get a similar question, but more directly about pensions. So just to reiterate, Lisa's question was, what's the difference between that cash balance pension and the traditional pension? And she's worked at her company for 15 years at this point, Steve, and says, I still don't get it. But it's a super common question and one that you're just trying to help people navigate through. So you want to help kind of just take us through the definitions of these. What's that traditional pension first, and then get into the cash balance comparison?
Definitely. So a traditional pension, and I'm sure many of you know somebody that maybe works for a government or was in the military for 20 years or something of that nature. So the company puts money away for you. And then when you retire, they calculate, when it starts sometimes it's not immediate. Just depends on who you're working for. Some may hold it until a certain date or something like that. But they calculate what it's going to be when it turns on, or maybe it starts right away. That is the traditional pension. And then really what you're wanting to do is the good ones actually get a cost of living. So Social Security is something similar to that, only you pay into it and your employer through your life. And then when you get to 62 to 70, whenever you decide to turn it on, that turns into a pension. And then along the way, you get a cost of living allowance. So it's something that's funded usually by the company when it's a pension. And Social Security is kind of unique because that's a little bit half and half. But that's what a traditional pension really is. When it comes to the cash balance pension, it's a little different. So with the cash balance pension, that is still a defined benefit plan, if you want to get into the technicals of it, but it's not a traditional pension. And what does that mean? It means that it's 100% funded by the employer, just like those traditional pensions, ex Social Security. That's funded by them, but instead of having to work there for 20 or 30 years to get to qualify to have your pension, because that was kind of the hook. People didn't want to work for the same person for 30 years, and they didn't want to lose their pension. So with the cash balance pension, it gives you a kind of freedom that you didn't have with the traditional. And this one accumulates cash, so like that present value, right? And also it makes some interest, so it's invested, it's guaranteed, right? Funded by the employer. And then when you get to retirement, you have some options for sure.
Okay, so we've got this traditional pension, and now we have this this additional option, this cash balance pension. It's sounding a little bit like a 401k in some regards, Steve. It's got this balance that goes along with it.
Yeah, it definitely is. And it's just, there's a couple things. It's funded a little bit differently. There's a very a scheduled way to do that. And so what I mean by that is most companies have a service credit. So they take your age and how many years you've been with the company, add those together, and it plugs into a grid that goes typically from 3 to 9%. And that 3 to 9% is very much like a match, only it's actually just a straight, if you make 100,000 and you're at 5%, let's say, level, and you go up as years go by, you get older and you work there for the company more. So $5,000 of that $100,000 salary you have would go into this for that particular year. And then they also have an interest credit. It's evaluated each year based on treasuries, LIBOR, there's all the GAT rate, there's everyone's a little bit different, but the point is it's like 4 to 6%. It kind of bounces around in that range. So you're getting a return on all of that money. But the beautiful thing is that it's all the employer's money that they're putting in there. The downside to it is it's easy to just kind of let it roll because you don't have any participation until you retire.
Okay, gotcha. So it's not really, is this part of that difference where it's not really invested in this cash balance plan, but it still grows on some sort of schedule?
Correct.
Okay.
So they're interest credits, and they're reserved for you, but it's not your account. It's the employer account. It's in one humongous account, and then when you retire, you have the option to take that money out, or when you change employment, take your that money out of the trust, or you can actually turn it into some kind of pension. So you can use, one of the big insurers will turn it into a fixed or a variable or some, whatever you're wanting. There's a lot of different choices at retirement. Or you can just take the cash out, which is very popular, and put it into a traditional IRA.
Okay, gotcha. Now, not every employer offers these two different strategies. So why do utility companies specifically offer this type of plan versus the traditional pensions?
So that's a little bit of an opinion. I think each company would would answer differently, but a lot of these jobs that people do are dangerous, and they want to make sure that the health plans are very good. They want to make sure the retirement plans so that the family's taken care of. Also, these what I've found by working with them, they really believe that a more financially secure employee is a better employee for them. So part of having that security are things like having a cash balance pension and a 401k. Also, having excellent retirement benefits or a healthcare benefit in retirement. Those are all things that make the family more financially secure. And also, they've kind of created their own culture. So if somebody wants to steal another employee from another utility, they have to have a similar type, benefit structure. So it's kind of become a nationwide culture to have these types of things.
Well, that's fantastic and helpful to understand some of those reasons why, Steve. Let's give maybe our question asker here a little bit more in depth answer in terms of putting some numbers down on the table. Let me give you a hypothetical, Steve, and say somebody's been with a company for 20 years. So a little bit longer than our question asker, but let's say someone's been with a company for 20 years. Can you give us an example of how this works with some numbers?
Sure. So let's 20 years, let's say, callers from California. So I'll pick one of those three major utilities there. And the cash balance pension, if they started at 20, okay, and they're in their first year, they're going to get 3%. So you can see that that's going to build really slow because they're in their lowest earning years and lowest percentage going in. So it's very much like this. And then as they go, they get into 4, 5, 6, all the way up to 9. So if they started young in their 20s, that last 10 years, they're hitting 9% of their highest earning years typically. So a lot of people think that the cash balance pension isn't very fun when you're young because there's not a lot of money going into it. But it's great because what it does is it protects kind of that older employee. It also helps to make sure that as we get closer to retirement, this is a built-in catch-up as well. So if you're young, don't worry about it. But if you've been there 20 years, you probably have over $100,000 in there that the employer put in there from that 3, 4, 5. You're probably hitting after 20 years, you're probably into 6%, I would guess, maybe even 7, depending on when you started, what age you were. And then also, you're getting that 4 to 6% interest credit coming in there. And as it builds up, at 100,000, you're talking about, getting, $4,000 to $6,000 of gain on the interest. And if you're making 100,000, they're dropping in at 6%, they're dropping in another 6. So it starts to add up for sure.
Yeah, we're talking what values between $250 to $400,000 at some point for somebody who's been in it 20 years. Obviously, based on a few of those variables that we don't know the answers to in the hypothetical, but that's a pretty serious chunk of change.
Yeah, definitely, and that would be for an employee that kind of worked up to the 150,000 range, maybe a little bit
Okay,
higher than my examples. But somebody who's making and not starting at that, but worked in a job that got
for part of that 20 years.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, for maybe the latter part of that where it was more and more. So as getting those promotions and those bumps up really help you in this particular program with the cash balance pension.
Now, I've got a clarifying question because you said something a little bit earlier that just gave me pause. You were kind of like, "Hey, this is your employer's plan,
Hmm.
not really yours, or it has that little bit of a feel to it."
Right.
So I'm sitting here just curious, like, is this guaranteed? If it's not my plan, like, am I sure I'm going to get that money? Let's make sure this isn't a too good to be true kind of thing.
So I'll give you the reality and then also the doomsday. Okay.
Okay.
So the reality is that the government, right, evaluates these annually to make sure that they're funded. Okay. But not all of them are funded, and you should, as an employee, you should be able to go into your website when you log in to go see all of your pension and
Mm,
all of your 401k. There's an annual report there to see how well funded it is, and I can help you with that as well if you have
okay.
questions. But usually, most utilities are very well funded, and it's not an issue. And it's just like the 401k is an employer plan in their name for the benefit of you, but it doesn't become yours until you retire and roll it out. Okay. Same thing with the cash balance pension. It's really in their name for the benefit of you until you roll it out. Now, with the cash balance pension, it does have a 60% guarantee on those benefits backed by the government. It's not
Okay.
FDIC, but it's got a 60% hold on that. That's the doomsday. So if it has 100,000, you would be able to retrieve 60 of it for sure if the company would go bankrupt or there was no money in there or fraud or whatever it was.
Okay. Well, that's good to know that at least there's a little bit of that risk, but it sounds like you don't view that as a reason to not trust this as a vehicle for planning your retirement around. That's a very rare and doomsday scenario for somebody to not get their full benefit.
Yeah, I would really start to get concerned if your company is funding the pension at like, at 60% or something lower than that. I would start
Okay.
concerned. But that's all public information.
Okay.
Yeah, for sure.
And I would imagine these are things you would help point out to somebody if their company headed in that direction. You would be aware of these things as well,
Yeah.
and how closely you work with these plans, and you'd be in the know and would help people kind of be aware of, we need to think about this a little bit more in depth.
That's one of the benefits of working with someone who has a real heartbeat on the utility industry nationwide.
Yeah. So if somebody's got one of these cash balance pensions and they're a utility employee, Steve, do they approach retirement a little bit differently, or should they approach their 401k specifically differently because they're participating in this pension opportunity as well?
Well, I guess it depends on how much money you want to make. You can always go ultra conservative and not make much. That's always an option for everyone. But yes, it alters it dramatically if you're a long-term employee. So you got to understand that caveat there, because if you've been there 5 years and you're 55 years old, there's not enough money in there to really augment some of that risk. But if you've been there for 20, 25 years and you're in your 50s, definitely is going to change how you manage your 401k. And this can be an amazing, amazing boost because it's the most money you're going to have in there. It's your highest income years. And it can really, by having an appropriate amount of risk for someone your age and your situation, we'd have to figure out exactly what that is, but it can turn into some serious dollars.
Okay, excellent. Well, if somebody is in Lisa's shoes, or we also used Mark as an example in our hypothetical scenario today, where they've got this cash balance pension and they're wondering, hey, what's a good next step that I can take to try to understand my retirement picture? What's the best next step somebody can take today?
So one of the things is to go into your website and go to the pension, not the savings. They're going to be separate. Go into the pension side and find out what your balance is. Just get in touch with it. And if you have a couple extra moments, click on a projection of what it'll be at 60 or 62 or 65 or whatever that desired number is in your head right now. So get that information so you kind of know what you're dealing with there. And then you want to look at your 401k projection, especially if you're 50 and above. And I would even coach you 40 and above should be starting to make different choices if you've been there for 20 years, 15 years, something like that. So do a portfolio analysis of your 401k and how that matches with that pension projection. And lastly, especially as you retire, get close to retiring, you want to run a retirement plan to make sure you're on track, so that you have some realistic goals and you're saving and contributing enough, and you can start to put the pieces together so the anxiety isn't building every year as you get closer to retirement, wondering if you're okay.
You want to make sure that you're not too aggressive. You want to make sure that you're not too conservative when it comes to planning for retirement. And that's what Steve helps you understand and get to the bottom of when you come in for a visit. And this is a great time to remind folks, if you are an employee of a large publicly traded utility, Steve has plans that are specifically designed for your industry, for your companies that you work for, that are unlike anything else out there, that are going to help you plan for the future. Just some really neat advantages that you have as being in this industry. And so if you'd like to learn a little bit more about that, no cost or obligation, but you can go to powerupyour401k.com. You can get Steve's retirement toolkit. It's going to include his book, Power Up Your 401k. Inside of that, as well as helpful guides, reports, worksheets, all sorts of good stuff. And Steve, can I convince you to run an analysis for folks if they download or get their hands on the toolkit as well?
Yes, if you order the toolkit, it'll have some amazing information, and I'll throw a Post-it in there that has my personal text number in there. And if you text that, I'll give you a free portfolio analysis on me, one-on-one.
Okay, we'll throw that in today as part of getting the toolkit. So again, go to powerupyour401k.com to order your toolkit for free. It's also linked in the description of today's show, so wherever you're viewing or listening to today's episode, should be easy to find. Don't forget to hit like on this video, subscribe if you haven't on YouTube. If you're listening on the audio version of the show, subscribe on your favorite podcasting app as well, so you never miss an episode. Steve, thanks for answering Lisa's question and for your guidance today, and we'll talk to you soon.
All right. Thanks, Walt. Thanks, everyone, for listening.
This podcast is provided by Powerhouse Financial Advisors, an independent firm with advisory services offered through Parsonex Advisory Services, Inc., PAS, a federally registered investment advisor. The information provided is for informational and educational purposes only and should not be considered as personalized investment advice. PAS does not guarantee the accuracy, completeness, or suitability of this information for your specific circumstances. Investment decisions should be based on an individual's goals, time horizon, and risk tolerance. Past performance is not indicative of future results, and all investments carry a degree of risk, including the potential loss of principal. Any case studies, testimonials, or endorsements shared in this podcast are illustrative of individual experiences and may not be representative of the experience of all clients. They do not guarantee future performance or success. You should not infer any level of assurance regarding future financial outcomes. Listeners should consult with a qualified financial, tax, or legal professional before making any investment decisions. Parsonex Advisory Services, Inc. does not provide tax or legal advice. Be sure to consult with your tax and legal professionals regarding your specific circumstances. For a copy of our Form ADV Part 2A, which provides additional information about PAS, including our advisory fees and services, please visit powerhousefinancialadvisors.com.